Good evening. Welcome to our next Markup UK webinar. I am Geert Bormans and I will be your host for this evening. For those that are joining us for the first time, since we could not have a live conference for obvious reasons, we decided to have a series of webinars instead, and at least have something to offer to the community this year. And we are very happy to, on each of these occasions, to see that so many of you show up for those webinars. We did find some really good speakers that were willing to spend quite some time preparing a good presentation. And this is the fourth one. We're almost halfway, and I would so please check out what we have up next for you. And would especially like to say that we have one coming up, which we only recently announced, and that webinar will be done by Adam Redder. And we would like your help on this one because, hey, you can help us decide what Adam will be talking about. I think it would be, however, be X-query related. So for today, I must tell you that we are recording this, so you can always review what Achim has to say today. And please do not use the chat unless you want to let the organization of Markup UK know something administrative. But for questions, we have the Q&A, so you can all send in questions. And my co-hosts for this evening, Andrew and Ari, are happy to answer those or leave them for Achim for after the session. So, I've mentioned his name a couple of times. Today, we're very, very happy that my good friend Achim Berndzen from Wolfenbüttel, and I really worked on that pronunciation, is here with us. Achim is one of the XProc editors. And Achim, well, if you followed one of the earlier webinars on XProc 3, you tried all the examples Erik has showed you, then you must have used the XProc processor that Achim built and maintains. So not much more to say. Please, Achim, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. Just let me share my screen and start the presentation. And go back to the first slide. So, okay, hi. This is, first of all, thanks Gert for introducing me. Welcome everybody to the next episode of the XProc 3.0 series we had in at Markup UK 2020. There were, as Gert said, there were already two previous episodes in this series, and Eric laid the basic of XProc 3.0, told you what you can do with XProc, how it works, what the basic concepts are. For the rest of this series, we decided to focus on special features of XProc 3.0. And today's topic is, as you might have guessed from the schedule, is JSON XProc. What we'll talk about is what you can do with JSON in XProc 3.0 and learn the basic concept of how to do this. In doing so, I will always, also broaden your concept of XProc, and especially the concept of a document in XProc. If you attended Eric's talks and or webinars, you heard a lot of documents in XProc, and I'm pretty sure that at least some of you associated XML documents whenever Eric said documents. Well, this is right. A document in XProc can be an XML document, but it can also be something completely different, especially it can be JSON. And this is what we're talking about today. But first, why bother about JSON? One possible answer would be JSON is the new XML. I hesitated to put this on the slides, and I would never do this for a physical conference, but I think for a webinar where you can't throw rotten tomatoes on me, it's okay. But I think we make a question mark behind this, or say no, because we all seriously engage with the XML stuff. But seriously, why bother about JSON? The first thing is there's a lot of useful JSON out there. The XML ecosystem is fine, but sometimes you have to go to JSON. For instance, when you check, imagine you check an academic paper and you want to run automatic checks on the bibliographical references, and you find a reference server, and this gives you either plain text or JSON. Here you obviously would go for the JSON because it's at least semi-structured. So there's some use case for JSON. And actually, sometimes I think that JSON and XML make a perfect combination. That struck me when I read the concept of web applications, where they have a container with all the XML documents making up the publication, and then they have a JSON object holding the inventory and the described path through the publications and through the pages. I think this is a perfect match because JSON is for the machine and XML is for humans. I hope these 2 points are enough to make you curious about what you can do with XProc, with JSON XProc. And the answer is you could do almost anything, because JSON is a first-class citizen in XProc. Almost everything Eric said about documents in XProc is true for JSON documents also. Almost everything, because if you remember, Eric mentioned adding attributes to a document. This is not something you can do to a JSON document, because a JSON document or JSON itself has no idea what an attribute is, as a text has no idea what an attribute is. An attribute is something which is special to the XML world. But apart from this, JSON is a first-class citizen, and that means in XProc 3.0, JSON documents can flow in and out of steps. And this is that makes it a first-class citizen. To understand why I call it a first-class citizen is, let me go back to XProc 1.0. There were ways to deal with JSON in XProc 1.0 too. But the JSON was completely internal to the step. So it doesn't flow in and it never flow out. But you could have a step which, say, takes a URI, reads the JSON at the URI, does something to the JSON, and puts some XML out, or something like this. But XProc 1 was XML in, XML out. So the only first-class citizen was an XML. In JSON, in XProc 3.0, this is different. JSON is a first class. It can flow in and out of a step. You can make decisions based on the content of a JSON document. So you can check, let's see, I have this JSON document and which value is associated with this key, and then you different things related to the value of the key, or the length of an array, or whatever comes to your mind in using an path expression. And of course, you can iterate over JSON sequences. That means you can have a sequence of JSON documents and they, okay, do this for every element in this sequence. So JSON can rightly say, I'm a first-class citizen. Let's see how this works, because the problem is that although JSON is a first-class citizen, it's not the only one. We have XML documents, which are first-class citizens. We have HTML documents, which are first-class citizens. And we have text documents, which are first-class citizens. If you have some familiarity with XProc, you might notice that I left out one class of documents because we have 5 documents. And this is because we have other documents or binary documents, let's say zips or something like this. And the binary document is not so sure whether he is a first-class citizen. And I would agree with him because, for instance, you cannot make decisions based on the content of the binary document. At least you can't do it that easy. This is the theoretical background, but this is also something which may come up in your pipelines. Imagine you have a zip archive and you unpack the zip archive. Eric will tell you this Thursday how this works in his webinar. So imagine you have this zip archive and a lot of documents flow out, and you need to know, probably you need to know in your pipeline whether the thing that flows out is an XML document, then you do one thing. If it's a JSON document, you do the other thing. And if it's a JPEG, you completely ignore it. So we need a way to understand what kind of documents we're dealing with. And this is something which is important to understand as an aspect of the concept of a document in XProc. The concept is a bit different, or is a special concept of document. It's not the concept of a document you might know from the XDM. What flows between the steps is a document, and a document is always a pair. It's a representation and properties. Properties are basically what you expect it to be, name value pairs holding arbitrary metadata. So we have name value pairs here, and we have arbitrary metadata. And you get a representation. This is the data you're working with, especially it is what you get when you use a context item expression. So the dot expression with that document being the context node. For our topic here, the most important property is named content type. It's actually, it's not a string, it's QName, but we invented some magic that you do not always have to create a QName. So the content type is always present with every document has a content type. Whenever you encounter a document in an XProc pipeline, it's safe to ask for its content type. And it tells you what content type you are dealing with. And it tells you what the representation is. So it tells you what you get if you put this document as context item for a XPath dot expression. Let's look at this in more detail. Obviously, when we have an XML document, the typical content type, there may be others, but the typical content type may be application XML. And this tells you that this document is an XML document. And it tells you what to expect as a representation, because the representation here is a document in the XDM. In the XDM sense of a document. So it's a document node with text nodes and element nodes, and the element nodes can have attributes and so on. Everything you know about XML is true for this. Now, obviously, this can't be the same for JSON documents. For JSON documents, the typical content type is application JSON. And this tells you that the representation is not an XDM node. So if you put a JSON document as context item for an XPath expression, which asks for the second element child or something like this, you will always get an empty sequence because there are no elements here. But we still stay in the XPath data model because representation will be either a map or an array or a selected range of atomic types. As you can see here, XProc rests a lot on the great work done with the XPath data model and the XPath functions. And I would say if you know how to deal with JSON in XQuery, in XSLT, or in XPath, you know 95% about how to deal of the possibilities to do something in XProc. There's a smooth transition and hopefully not too much disruption. If you know how XPath deals with JSON, I think the next slide will not surprise you. In JSON, we have these 6 element types. We have objects, we have arrays, we have strings, numbers, Boolean, and the null object, or the null element, and the corresponding items in XDM are relatively easy. An object is always mapped to a map. An array is mapped to an item, and so on. The rest is obvious. Null is mapped to the empty sequence. This is exactly the mapping you get when you call XPath function parse JSON, where JSON goes in and an XDM instance comes out. Okay, these are the basic concepts you have to understand when you want to work with JSON. Now let's look for some basic use patterns in JSON. Something I try to come up with the things that you need probably every day when you work with JSON documents in XProc, and show you how this works. The first thing is how to create a JSON document inline. Eric showed you in his talks how to create an XML document in an XProc pipeline. Now we have to look for JSON. Well, here's how to do this. You have we have a p input, and then we have a p inline element. Let me open up stuff. We have a p inline element, and then the JSON is inside here. We have a JSON map with a key, and its key associated to an array, and this array has number and another number and a string and another map with 2 entries. What is new here is the p inline element. With when you want to create an XML document, you just write with input, and then in most cases you can just write down the XML. Now you need a p inline element because you have to tell the XProc processor, look, I want this, what is written here, not to be parsed as XML, because this would probably fails, but I want to parse this as application JSON. This is what the content type does. The content type sets the document property content type and tells the processor to parse the content as JSON. If you look at it closely, you might have discovered the 2 curly braces. It's important when you write it this way that you use 2 curly braces, because there are 2 ways XProc uses curly braces. Curly braces, a single curly brace will turn on the text value tablet, TVT, and a double one will give you the normal curly brace. So for this to be properly parsed as JSON, you have to use double curly braces to distinct the object for its limits from a TVT, and to say, okay, this is not a TVT, this is should be a JSON document. The other way to do, this is to get rid of TVTs for a special part. If you want to make sure that a part is never ever interpreted as TVTs, you just can write expand text false, and this means for this inline you can have single curly brackets, because the processor will not interpret this as a JSON document. How do you load a JSON document from your file system? Well, it's as easy as this. Pload, as you would do for XML documents, and then you put an href to the JSON document. This should work with every processor, but problem is, how is the processor expected to know that a JSON parsing should take place and not an XML parsing or something like this? In my processor, the .json extension is mapped to JSON, so it works automatically. I think that will be true with XML Calabash too. But if you are not sure, write the content type behind and tell the processor what it should do. This is important if you have JSON documents which use different file extensions, because what I do here is simply a file extension guessing. And I think this is what most of the processors will do, sneaking into the documents and see or try different parsing techniques and look which one does not raise an error, is too expensive for, too time expensive for most things. And of course, you can also use a JSON document directly on a port. Just write pdocument, as Eric showed you for XML documents, and then to be sure, you can write content type application JSON to make sure the processor will start the JSON parser and not the XML parser. Of course, you could also use the built-in XPath functions. So JSON doc with the name is exactly the same as I showed you before. Here we have the XPath expression to load the JSON document. And if you want to do it from the web, well, nothing easier than that. The new HTTP request in XProc 3.0 is much easier than the one in 1.0. You just give the URI, and if you are not sure that the processor gives you the right content type back, you can say override content type application JSON. But if the processor is correctly configured, he should give back the content type application JSON in the response. Okay. Next thing then is check whether a document is a JSON document. Remember, think where the documents flow out of a zip document and you want to know whether it's a JSON document. Here's how to do it. You can ask the processor for the document properties of any given document with the function pDocumentProperties. We've seen that the content type is also always present, and if it gives you back application JSON, then you do something with it. In this case, I use a Swiss knife step cast content type, which is there to turn documents from one document content type into another. It doesn't just override the content type, but it actually converts JSON to XML with the same algorithm as laid out in the XPath function specification. And then we have some. Oh, sorry, I forgot this. Sometimes you cannot use the document properties function, because in XProc we have two different XPath contexts, and in a step context, you cannot use the document properties function. But as we have learned that that XProc, that JSON is not an XDM node, never ever, you can simply use this and check whether the context document is an instance of a node. If it is, then it's not a JSON. So if this is true, it will be a JSON, and it can do the same. And then we have some steps special for JSON. We have JSON join, which takes a lot of JSON documents on the source port and returns one array from all of the documents on port source. And we have a step JSON merge, which does the same for maps. So on the source port are a lot of maps, and what comes out on the result port is exactly one map, where all the other maps are merged. If there are no key collisions, if there are key collisions, there are special rules to follow. And in the future, we also might have JSON validate. I think this is a recommendation. This is a requirement which we will have. And as our SAP library is pretty open, we can define this step pretty quickly and implement it. Okay, so much for the slides. Now let's go to live coding. I would like to show you some a pipeline and how I develop how this pipeline works, which deals with JSON. Do you remember I said there's a lot of useful JSON out there? Okay, for instance, this one. There is a website called Swappy, so Star Wars RP. Maybe one or the other knows this. And what they have is useful information for all the XML people. They have a lot of Star Wars data. They have data about the planets, spaceships, vehicles, people, and so on. And everything is in JSON, so it's a perfect way to work with JSON. Some of you might remember that I did this, that I mentioned this website. I think it was 2 years ago in at the unconference date XProc. I gave this example. I developed it further. Eric took it as a basic example on working with JSON in his book. And now you'll see the third evaluation, or the third stage of this. Let's go to Oxygen now. I hope the slides are big enough. I have a simple XProc pipeline. I define an output port result. What I want to have is, I want to have what should be the outcome is get a synopsis of this JSON data just for the characters appearing in the Star Wars movie. I want a nice list with where the attributes of each character appearing in the movies are listed on an XML page. You can find these on, to do this, you can call this web service is HTTP Swappy Dev API and people. And to be sure, I say the content type is application JSON, but their server is correctly configured. So let's do this and see what happens. Obviously, we have what comes out is a nice, I may turn this out, is a nice JSON document. Sorry, I did not find out how to make this part of the window bigger with Oxygen. I only can make this part bigger, but I think you got the idea. Here we have the characters about the information about Luke Skywalker. He's 1 meter 17. I think it's in meters. He's blonde. He has blue eyes. His birth date is given here, and he's a male. And so we have the character data. They say they have information about 82 characters from the movies. They have not all the movies. I think they have the first 7 movies. So if someone volunteers to put on the additional data, I think there's work to do there. We have 3PO and so on. What you might have guessed from, let me scroll around. If you look at it, these are not 82, not the information about 82 characters, because they trunk it. You get, I think, 10 each time. And what we actually get is here a JSON object, which says, okay, the total data are 82. And here is in the result, there's some data. And if you want more data, please call this 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 URI, and you get the next trunk, and it's clear the next trunk will have page 2 and so on. Sorry. So this approach is fine if we take the first 9 elements out of the database, but I want to have all of them. Let me just draw this back down. We want to have all of them, and so we have to use a different step. And this is relatively easy what we do. I declared a step inside the step. Everything is a step in XProc. And this step is just recursively calling, taking the data from one URI, and if the data has a URI to next, it calls recursively the same. I think if you know how to write a recursive function in XParse or in XQuery, you will understand how this works. And I can call this step just by using its name. In a different namespace, you cannot define your own steps in the XProc namespace. You have to use your own namespaces. So I made up my own namespace for this. Okay, let's run this. And now you see we have a lot more of data. The list is much longer than before. It's still, we had 10 pages together. The first is still Luke Skywalker, and the last one now is Tion Meaden. I have actually no idea what this character is, so maybe someone knows this. So this is pretty easy to write recursive steps loading. This, if you look at the results, let me go back to the start. If you look at the results, they are fine. However, we have now the results. However, if you look here, the name is a string, the height is a string, and so on. But if I want to know the homeworld, the name of the homeworld of Luke Skywalker, everyone knows what the homeworld of Luke Skywalker is, but we have to check. The homeworld of Luke Skywalker is a link to a planet info. And what I would like to do now is to extend the map. First. If you look here, we have the metadata and we have the actual data. And what I want to do now is get rid of the metadata and take just results. So just take the array, just take the array information results and flatten the arrays. So I get nice 82 maps with the characters. And I'm sorry. Yes, this was a test. I did, okay. Run the pipeline again. And now we have a sequence of nice 82 objects, each object corresponding to one of the characters. I put the examples in a repro on GitHub. I will show you in about 5 minutes, and you can do the examples yourself. So my scrolling in the results may be a bit too fast. I'm sorry for that. So now, what I want to do now, what we now have, we have 82 characters. Sorry, each represent 82 objects, each representing one character. But the character species is a possibly empty array. For some, if you look here for species, this Luke Skywalker doesn't have any spacey, doesn't have any spacey entries, so this is an array. For other ones, like here we have 3PO, his species should be an Android, is it? Yes, it's species 2. Okay, so what I want to do now is to replace this link with the name of the species. So we have to call this URI and take the data from there, and this is how it works. Let me make this a bit bigger again. What I do now is I go over all the 82 objects in the sequence, and for each object I extract the home world, the value associated to the key home world, load the JSON document, which is given by this URI, take the name or the value that is associated to the key name in this document, and then I replace it with the original home world. So I follow the link, take the data out and put it into the map again. And the same is done here by species, with the only difference that species may be an empty array, so there is no link. So what I do here is I just test if species is associated with a non-empty array, and if so, I take the value out of it. Let's run this. Sorry. And now, as you can see, we have, let's go back to Luke Skywalker. We have 82 JSON objects in our sequence, and we know now that the home world of Luke Skywalker is Tatooine, and that his species is undefined. And do we have someone with a defined species? Let's see. I can't find it. Okay, there are some who have a, oh yes, of course, 3PO is, his home world is also from Tatooine, and his species is, he's an android. She is an android. Okay. And the last thing we have to do now, so what we have now is 82 JSON objects, sorry, each representing one character, and the species and the home world are now represented as a string. But we're still in the JSON area. So what we wanted to have is, and this is the last example, is we want to convert, or we want to result in HTML. We want an HTML result, and there are many ways to do this. One way to do this would be to call the pcast content type step in XProc and convert all the JSON objects to XML objects with the in the structure defined for XPath function, and then call XSLT to do this. The other thing we could do is to call XSLT straight with the JSON, with the map, but I decided to go a different way. I wrote a new step, it's demo format, and what demo format simply does is, sorry, here it takes a JSON document as source, and it returns an application XML as results. And what it does, it creates, here I now use the text value templates. It creates for each a character object with a name element, and the value is the value associated to the name key in the map, in the incoming map, and the same for gender and home world and species. So this is just an XProc way to do this. It's maybe it's not the nicest way to do this, but I think for the purpose of this talk, it makes sense to do it this way. Okay, so what we have then is, if we run this step, is we have 82 XML documents representing one character. And the rest of the pipeline I wrote is fairly easy, and it's not related to JSON at all, because what comes out here is just XML. And what we have to do now is, obviously, we have 82 XML documents. We have to make them one. So I just wrap a body element around this. So we have one element. What comes out here is one document with a body element. I'm sorry. And then what I do is I insert an H1 element there with a title and the current date time. I wrap this all in an HTML document. So now we have an HTML document having a body child and having the 82 characters. The body has the 82 character as child. And as we want nice styling, I just add some CSS link there, and I store this at a place. Let's see how this looks. When we run this, you see we have, obviously now we have an XML document, and if I find the start of the XML document, sorry for scrolling so fast, I guess. Go to the start of the XML document. We have an XML document with a meta. We have a link to the style sheets. We have a body. The body has an H1 element, and here, and we have a nice entry which says that the guy called Luke Skywalker is male and he's Tatooine, and we have this as a name value property. You'll see that it runs reasonably quick. Obviously, I do not actually call the server because I have an XML resolver installed. If you use it with no XML resolver, it is a bit slower, or it's significantly slower than now. But I did not want to trust the server. Their load is significantly different over the times, and now the US get up. So I expected some problems with the server. Let's look at the results. Here you can see that the header, and what we have is a nice formatted table with Luke Skywalker, and we have all the properties here, and this for all the 82 characters. The only drawback of the XProc only approach is that there's no way to sort this by name. So I had, if I want to sort it, I had think I have to go back to XSLT again. Okay, so this was what I have. Thanks for listening. This is time to answer your questions now. If you want to contact me about this or about anything else, you will find my, here's my email address. And if you want to look at the slides and the examples, here's the name of the GitHub repro where you find it. Over to you, Gert.
Okay, thank you very much, Achim. It's impressive to see how XML technologies have embraced JSON almost without hurdles. It's very cool to see all this in working. I see there are no questions actually, so you have been very complete.
Everyone has fallen asleep?
No. Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There is some virtual applause, that's for sure.
Thank you very much.
There is, at some point you do an HTTP request. That's a detailed question. And you put a p-empty in there.
Yeah. Let me go back to the relevant slide. I think it's this one. It's here. I guess you're asking about this p-empty.
That's to avoid that you post something?
No, the problem is that we defined the source port on a PHTTP request as primary. So it is also it's also always connected to something on the pipeline. And this is handy if you do post or put, because most probably you produced some document and you want to post it or put it. But for the get method, it does not make any sense. But as I have to connect this port, I have to put pempty in here. So this is a little bit of a hurdle. Actually, I never call, in my pipelines, I never call get with this, because I have a special get, a self-written step, which is just a two-liner in XProc, which does this by default. So you don't have to write the pempty. Does this answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you very much. It's very clarifying. Whilst we were doing this, or whilst you were doing this, I have a question from Sheila. Sheila, can I unmute you so you can ask the question yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Achim.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi. It's a while since I looked at this. I think we looked at it at summer school, but I've forgotten it all, so this is really useful, thank you. The notation for referencing nodes in JSON, so for example, where we would normally do an XPath in XML,
yeah,
you were writing things like question mark name.
Yeah.
Where is that notation defined? Is it in the XProc spec?
No, this is XPath 3.1. In XPath 3.1, I think it's called postfix operator. I'm not sure whether it was in XPath 3.0, but it's definitely in 3.1. It's just a shortcut for writing map get. So if you want to use it, there's a function, I think it's called map get, and what you normally would do is to call this function with a map as a first parameter and the name of the key you want to look up as a second parameter, but the question mark is just a short notation. It's pure XPath.
Great.
So you can use it anywhere, and there is also you can use it for some XML expressions.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to mute myself again because there's alarms, sirens.
Okay, I hope it's not you if the ambulance gets after.
No.
Okay, good.
I live next to a hospital.
Okay, yeah.
So it occurred to me, if you allow me, Achim, that you have an integration for Oxygen working.
So no, no. Let me go back. Yeah, I have the same integration as you have. Because it's pretty easy. Oh, someone asked about this. It's pretty easy to do this because you have this external tools. I have the German version, so it's externe Werkzeuge. And what you can do is you just can define a command line call here. So let me show you what this actually does. I think I just wrote what I normally would type on the command line, with the only difference that I use this nice Oxygen macros to define that I want to run the current pipeline.
Okay.
This is not an integration working, because if you want to use options on the pipeline, you have to change this thing all over again. But if you have a pipeline which has a fixed input for time, this makes sense instead of switching between the command, the console interface and Oxygen. It's not perfect. I will try to come up with some interface for Oxygen maybe in the next month or something like this. But Oxygen has an interface for XProc, which is a 1.0 interface, and which deals with XML Calabash and Morgana XProc if you use my plugin. But now we have some problems with options. For instance, remember in XProc 1.0, an option was always a string. In XProc 3.0, it's a map. It can be a map or an array or something like this. How do you use the Oxygen interface to type in an array or a map? I have to figure this out.
Okay, thank you very much. Achim, thank you very much for this, and everyone attending, thank you very much for your time. I hope you like this.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. And before Gert stops, I would like to make call out a special thank for the Markup UK organizers for making the webinars happen, because it's at least something which keeps the community together in this time. So let's give them a round of virtual applause, please.
Okay,
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Achim. So,
and don't miss Eric's webinar this Thursday.
thank you. Hope to see you all there. See you Thursday. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.